June 8th, 2010, Russell Wilson, fourth round pick to the Colorado Rockies baseball. I'm fired up. One of the highest moments of my life. Every kid's dream to be drafted by a Major League Baseball team. June 8th, 2010. June 9th, 2010, the line goes flat. My dad passes away. The highest of the high to the lowest of the low. Just like that. My dad laying in his deathbed and just tears running down my face. And, what do I do next? And my mind racing memories, flashbacks, moments, early mornings, getting up, taking grounders and throwing speed outs and deep post routes to my brother and my dad, to early morning car rides to AAU baseball, to my dad being the third base coach. Fast forward to the championship high of winning a Super Bowl, holding up the Lombardi trophy, and the emotions and the excitement of it all, and blue and green confetti all over the place, and knowing that you just won the Super Bowl. To a year later, the pressure of the game and the ball on the 1 yard line, and this is the chance to win the game, and it doesn't work. And however many millions and millions of people all over the world watching and having to walk to the media, and what do I say next? What do I do? What do I think? Being married at a young age and just coming out of college and everything else to, shortly after, marriage not working out, and realizing, what? Life happens. Life happens. Life happens to all of us. Loss of family members, divorce, fear, pain, depression, concerns, worries. When you think about being super positive, yes, I'm positive by nature, but positivity, it doesn't always work, because when you're down 16-0 in the NFC Championship game and people are like, Russ, we're not going to be able to win this game, man. It's not a great situation right now. Or when you're facing cancer, or when you have, things that you have to deal with, or finances and this and that, how do we deal with it? And it's hard to be positive in the midst of it all. And what I definitely knew was this, that negativity works 100% of the time. Negativity was going to get me nowhere. I started saying to myself, new are his mercies every morning, new beginnings, new starts. And despite hardship and pain and worries and wanting to get through it, and how do I do this? I started thinking about a car. You guys have to drive a car and you got stick shift and you want to shift to neutral. Well, you go from first gear to second gear all the way to fifth. Well, you got to know how to shift to neutral. And I needed to shift to neutral immediately before I crashed. Sitting there after the Super Bowl, I had a decision to make. Will I let this define my career? Will I let it define my life? Hell no. What I found out was this. The mindset is a skill. It can be taught and learned. I started 10 years ago training my mind with this guy named Trevor, Moawad, my mental conditioning coach, and he's been with me for 10 years, and we've been best friends and partners ever since. And as athletes, we train the body, we train ourselves to be able to run faster and throw farther and jump higher and do these different things, but why don't we train our mind? What do you want your life to look like? Write it out. Talk about it, say it. What's our language? What does our language look like? Watch these highlights, Russell, when you're in your best moments. What does that look like? And be that, live that, sound like that. The best free throw shooters, they don't worry about the shot they just missed. They think about this shot, this putt, this throw, this first down. Then I met this kid, Milton Wright, 19 years old. He had cancer 3 different times. This day when I went to go see Milton was frustrated. Russ, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's my time to go. And I said, Milton, I started telling him this story about my dad and how my dad used to say, son, why not you? Why not you graduate early? Why not you play pro football and pro baseball? Why not you? Why not you? Why not you? And so I said, Milton, why not you? If you try T-cell therapy and you try this and it doesn't work, you won't remember. So Milton got a smile on his face and he said, you know what? You're exactly right. Yes, I do have cancer, Russ. But I can either let this kill me, not just physically, but I can also let it kill me emotionally and mentally. And I have a choice right now, in the midst of the problem, in the midst of the storm, to decide to overcome. One of the questions I always get asked about neutral thinking is this. Does that mean I don't have any emotion? I always say, absolutely not. Yeah, we have emotions. We have real life situations. We have things to deal with. But what you have to be able to do is to stay focused on the moment and to not be super emotional. It's okay to have emotions, but don't be emotional. When people look at me, they see that I'm the highest paid player in the NFL. They see that I have the girl and Sierra, that I have the family and this and that. But I still have real life situations. We all do. We all have sadness and loss and depression and worries and fear. I didn't just get here. What's the truth? And how do I come through this better? And that's really kind of how my mind started shifting. It was not just on the success of it all or the failure of it. It was on the process. Like, what is the next step? How do I do this right here, right now? You have a choice to make in life. And for me, when I was young and I didn't have much, I made a choice. I made a choice that I was going to believe that great things were going to happen, that I was going to have my mindset right, and I was going to have the right language and the right things to think about, which helped prepare me for today, because I'm just human. I just have the ability to throw the ball a long way and run around and make some cool and fun throws and make some people smile. But the reality is that I still have pressure. I still have worries. I still have fears. I still have things that happen. I still have loss. Positivity can be dangerous, but what always works is negativity. I never want to live in negativity. So I stayed in neutral. I kept my shift in neutral. And so that's where I lived. That's where I've been living ever since.
Man, you have no clue how much I've been looking forward to this, because I've read your book multiple times now over. I think probably one of the biggest things is not only are you from, an area that I consider my hometown, but you've inspired athletes long before Russell. I mean, you mentioned in the book, you started your career off in this at what would be considered the, Jedi Academy or Hogwarts for professional athletes. And you worked with guys over at IMG's Academy, who incidentally enough now has the #1 high school ranked football team in the country again. You were working with guys like Eli Manning, Steve Hutchinson. You were just, the list goes on and on.
It just
Jimbo
means I'm
Fisher.
old, brother. It means I'm old.
Hey, man,
but,
you ain't that old. You ain't that old. I looked it up.
I know I'm not that old.
Far.
Russ was in our 12th draft class, but IMG Academy is 600-acre training center. I was played a couple of years of pro soccer, high school teacher, 4 years. Went out to Bradenton, in Florida. Grew up half my life, obviously, my first 17 years of my life in Washington State. In Lakewood, went to Charles Wright Academy. And then,
that well.
So half my life in the South and half my life in the West.
Okay. Well,
I live in California now.
I know Russ just did, what was it, his first TED Talk, right?
Yes.
He just got done doing his first TED Talk, and that was like a beaming infomercial for everything that you preach. So for those who don't know, this concept translates so easily into real estate and home building and construction, the whole nine. Can you tell me a little bit and just define for everybody that's watching what neutral thinking is?
Well, first of all, my mother and my brother both work for John L. Scott. So, I have a unique understanding, obviously, of the real estate world. Just sold my third house, not as a realtor, but just in my life, 3 houses. So Scottsdale, Arizona, before I moved out here to Manhattan Beach. So I've got great respect for the industry. I know the ups and downs and the unique challenges that many people in Seattle and Tacoma and Silverdale and Snohomish and Spokane faced in 2007, 8, 9, 10. So it's great to see the market doing well. On the sales side, on the commercial side, on the broker side. So that's always a good thing. When I left Washington, I went down to school, a small school in LA called Occidental College, undergrad and graduate school, and then obviously out to the South for 18 years. The population I would teach in sports psychology was Alabama football, Jacksonville Jaguars, Miami Dolphins, Florida State, Texas, and how I journeyed into that from a kid from Lakewood is a separate story. But unlike the real estate world and a lot of world, the sports industry, there are no Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
There's no, for the most part, no athletes are reading self-help books. There is no, there's no marketplace for Ed Milet, it's just doesn't exist. So it's a handful of coaches that believe you can, that you don't need to be sick to get better, that you can weaponize your mind, and really want to integrate it as part of the training platform. Big, fast, strong, competitive psychologically. But it's hard because you look at the marketplace now, it's meditation, it's mindfulness. I mean, just stuff that athletes would think is a fucking joke, and so, but people think meditating is the key to changing your life, and meditations is a part of the process, but it's like way down the road. So, when I started with Nick Saban, a lot of it was how do we take a message to everybody? So as much as like the power of positive thinking and all those things, I figured out early on that when your population is 85% single parent, 60% below the poverty line, just what we were dealing with.
And let's not forget those kids at Alabama. Those are kids. They're coming in. I mean, if anybody at home is watching this and they're working on their own mental stability, try working on it with a 17-year-old kid who has been so committed to one thing his whole life, been told he's super talented, 10,000 miles away from home, and now Trevor walks in, and has to get his attention, right?
But I think also just, a lot of tough lives and, I mean, just bullshit proof. And like realtors in the business world love being bullshitted too. Like what's the new thing I can buy? All the things where athletes, it's got to make sense. It's got to work in real time. It's got to be practical. It's got to help us beat LSU this weekend. And same with the military. All my years out, involved at Fort Bragg and the other places. And then obviously I spent time in the business world. IMG, we're a huge business. I had 80 employees that worked for me. So we when we studied the information, particularly after our first season at Alabama, we just started to understand that all the science around positive thinking was anecdotal. It was really hard to prove. People would try it for a little bit and then just bail. But we found out that all the data around negative thinking was really clear, that negative thinking worked negatively. 83% from the Mayo Clinic. All the data reduces your creativity by 18%, your ability to make decisions by 30 to 40%. If we could learn how to eliminate negativity and never really worry about trying to be more positive, that could change our whole culture. Yeah. And the sports world is, it's an EBITDA-driven business. 35% of our coaches are fired every year. In the NFL, only 25% of our guys make it to a fourth season. It's hyper competitive, very similar to your industry, except for you're adding the physiological element, and you're doing it in front of everybody. But in the same sense, you sort of eat what you kill. That's very, very similar, I think, in the sports world. So our psychological message, had to make sense. It had to be simple. It had to be really basic. And so it became early on, how do we eliminate negativity from the organization? Well, how's negativity translated? Is it our thoughts? Yeah, I mean, everybody's all over the place inside their mind with their thoughts. But language is the number one carrier in an organization of negativity. And when we say something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than when we think it. And if it's negative, it's a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than if it's positive. So all the data from Georgetown, Harvard that we were reading and understanding at that time said, if you say stupid shit out loud, it increases your probability by 40 to 70 times that what you don't want to have happen will happen. So just by not saying it was a game changer. Not complaining about the heat, not complaining about the circumstances, your coaches, the being on the road or being at home or your academic load or your personal life. Just not complaining. There's no science that says venting will help you perform. So how to not say stupid things out loud. Our culture changed, and we went from 6 wins to 12 wins at Alabama. Lost to Tebow in the SEC championship. But that was a starting point, and I started to see guys understanding, and it was so easy to find the research and the stories and the E60s and the 30 for 30s. We've had examples like Bill Buckner, the baseball player for the Red Sox, who right before the World Series says, I don't want to be the guy to let the game-winning run score on a ground ball through my legs. 12 days before the World Series, Game 6 against the Mets, ball gets hit to him, goes through his legs. They lose. Mets end up winning the World Series. And there were so many examples like that.
So basically speaking into reality, your own demise, right?
Well, increasing the probability by externalizing it that what you don't want to have happen is going to happen. And and positive thinking being 40 to 70 times weaker than negative thinking. I mean, look at our politics today, Sean. I mean, a positive message versus a negative message, there's no chance.
Yeah.
And it's hard wiring. It's just that's how we're wired. So the more and then the secondary form of negativity was consumption, television, music, conversations, movies, the people we were around. 3 minutes of cable news increase your probability by 27% that you'll say you had a terrible day if you have 3 minutes of news before 9 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
In cable news, they understand the statistics. They have, in the military, one of the things I learned, a lot of guys, that studied the idea of modern media, and they taught the guys, particularly the special operations community, proactively, this is who CNN markets to. This is who Fox markets to. This is who MSNBC markets to. They don't have any obligation to the truth. Their obligation is to the people investing, paying them money from a marketing perspective. So once you start to understand that, you get control of, if I watch the news, I'm taking a huge risk by increasing negativity, which increases web pages that go active in my brain, and I become less functional.
And that can even happen
at high level in sports. If you don't function at you're going to get fired.
Right. And that can even happen in your sales meeting. So again, if you're a real estate agent or a loan officer and you're watching this, and I mean, we all know that one person who walks into the sales meeting or now virtually, and they're just like, oh, the market, did you see what happened on the news? There's no listings. You hear that attitude come out. Well, that's a negative commercial if I'm hearing you right, correct?
It is, but like in your work environment, it's tough to avoid it. I'm talking about in your personal environment. When Sean goes home, you got a choice what you're going to turn on.
No country music.
Choice who you're going to call when you're leaving home. You got a choice what movies you're going to watch. You got and so look. I was talking to a good friend of mine in the NBA this morning, and we were talking about like what separates great performers in anything, and most of the time it's what they don't do, not what they do. That separates them, what they don't eat, what they don't watch. Like Russell doesn't fit the physiological or anthropometric metrics at all relative to size and certain components. And I've evaluated, 8 years, guys, for the draft when I worked for the Jaguars. And he just doesn't fit those metrics. And yet, because of the things he doesn't do, the discipline, the lack of complaining, even years where Seattle's been thin offensively, I've never heard him say anything about the offensive line, never said anything about the receivers, and it probably hurts him because he doesn't complain in some senses. And he just says, like, whatever it takes, just find an excuse to win. And, and he does. And so I think that's before you can get to neutral, you have to understand the power of negative versus positive, and negative. They don't even play in the same field. And so, and what meditation and some of those things and mindfulness do, they try to change the inside thoughts by, reimagining a new version of yourself, a new world, a different change inside, and then ultimately being able to recondition and project it outside. That is like organic chemistry. It's a really difficult skill, but it's nowhere near as powerful as what you say out loud. If you're saying all these things out loud, watching all the wrong things, then trying to change from the inside out or meditate with your Calm app for 30 minutes, what's the point? So if you just didn't say the wrong things out loud, and that's all you got from this as a loan officer or a broker or a realtor, just stop saying dumb things out loud. It would change your life exponentially.
And the actual quote in the book is "Stop saying stupid shit out loud." So just just go with that. But I know that I personally gravitated towards your book, and you and I have talked a little bit about this because the concept of neutral thinking really helps you concentrate when all these other factors are swirling around in your life, because these other factors, actually, these dramatic events, can just induce emotion, and we don't always make the best choices when we're emotional or distracted, and in the world of real estate, trust me, there is a ton of distraction, as there is on the news right now. So with that being said, how do you cultivate neutral thinking? And I want to frame it like this. You and Russell shared this same thing, and I also went through the same exact deal. You guys had Russell had just won a championship, and the Super Bowl here in Seattle, which we were all excited about. And then he was going through a divorce. You had probably one of the most celebrated clients in the NFL, and you are going through a divorce. I did something very similar, and it wrecks you, and there's always that additive of, real estate agents are always being sold something. You mentioned it, somebody's always trying to BS somebody in this business. Talk to me about how you can cultivate that concept of neutral thinking. Like, what does it take?
Well, I think what we learned when we sort of, designed it was neutral wasn't this lack of emotion or stoicism like Ryan Holiday writes about. Mm-hmm. It was this idea that the past is real. And I think one of the challenges, my dad, Bob Moawad, was a huge figure in Washington State, and then joined Lou Tice early on, who developed the Pacific Institute, which was a great consulting firm for many years up there in Seattle, but had an international footprint. And Lou Tice affected many people, including Pete Carroll and tons of people, and so did my father. But, the only thing kind of from their perspective, was you were either negative or positive. And the tough thing, I think, for most people about positive thinking, for me, 44 years of living, growing up in that environment and growing up with the education, is it always connects to an outcome. So when something's not going well and you're told to be positive, you feel like you have to pretend what's not going well is going well. And it creates this dissonance in your mind. And we're having a bad quarter. Well, we're going to turn around and have a good one. Well, you don't know. And so it's always connected to an outcome. But negative is so powerful that when we go there and we talk about it and we live there, it automatically starts bleeding into the future. So it's really hard to overcome. Even the best of us, when we go there, it's so powerful, it just is what it is. So neutral is this idea like a car. If a car is going backwards, it can't go to forwards. It has to downshift into neutral first. And what neutral says is, all right, this is real. This divorce is real. This pandemic is real. My situation that I might be dealing with financially or being furloughed or whatever the situation, it's real. Or a good situation, my success now is real. My new spouse, the love, the joy, the joint families of kids is real. But while the past is real, it's not predictive. Your future is based on what you do, not how you feel. Right. And that's the truth. The biggest assholes that are listening to this right now, no matter who they are or how cynical they are about the world they live in right now, they can't say, Sean, this is what's going to happen tomorrow. They can guess, but tomorrow hasn't happened. Tomorrow will be more influenced by what you do right now. And that's just the truth. And our players understood that. And so you'll hear our guys, look, we just had to stay neutral. We know we didn't come out ready to play, but we knew that the second half and first half were two different parts. So what we were going to do next was going to be more powerful than what just happened. And it works both ways. And so this isn't about sports.
No.
The book talks about Apollo 13 and Jim Lovell's press conference, and when the 208,000 miles away, the ship blows up. Like positive, hey, you don't know if you're going to be able to make it back to the earth, nor should you be thinking about that, but you don't want to catastrophize. So his whole process you can go on YouTube and see the actual press conference. Is all right. Can we still orbit the moon? No. Can we still land? No. All right. Can we go from this ship to the LEM? Yes, we can. What's going to happen with our oxygen? Too much carbon monoxide. How are we going to solve? And it's just one step at a time. It's not dramatic, but neutral thinking is also neutral behavior. Just what am I going to do next? You know, and I think your industry is competitive. It's really important. I think, you know, from a loan officer perspective, I think the financial worries and the different types of things and being able to go through that process, you know, effectively without, you know, just too many hoops. I mean, I just went through it, you know, and then I think also from a realtor perspective, your knowledge, but your consistency, your authenticity, you know, all those things are so important. And I don't think it's your education and your understanding of geography. I think in real estate, it's your relationships, but it's your competence too. And
then
if you're incompetent right now, you can take steps to get more competent and get better.
Well, let's continue down that path, because one of the chapters that I absolutely loved in the book is entitled "It Takes a Plan." Okay. And, you know, you mentioned in there, it takes a plan to achieve anything of value. So real estate agents and home builders really are the equivalent to quarterbacks in our industry. And no doubt everybody had a great plan at the very end of 2019, start of 2020. And then that plan got blown up, I'm sure, as your mom and brother have communicated to you, at about the end of March, going into April with the stay-at-home orders. So how do you?
Well, I'm in California. We have a stay-at-home order until August 1st, and
right.
I'm following it. You know,
absolutely
aren't anymore, unfortunately, but you see the consequences for that as well.
How do you coach, you know, guys like Russell? Because I remember there was one part where you and Jimbo Fisher had a talk going into the locker room. You know, when you have to make those in-game adjustments, because the plan didn't really. You had a plan, but somebody else had a better plan. How do you make those in-game adjustments? Because we're about halftime right now for 2020.
Yeah, heading into quarter three.
Yeah,
I mean, neutral is unbiased, non-judgmental thinking. Like, what's the truth? Yep. So this is the simple truth right now. Just you know, human contact, fear, a little bit of anxiety going into somebody's house. How is things transmitted? You know, there's you know, opportunities. I know for us at my company with Russell, Limitless Minds, you know, where we might have made 10 calls to sell a sale, it might be 50 calls on the outgoing side now, adapting to webinars versus in person, which I think has been a lot more effective than people know. I think we're going to get a lot of benefits out of this webinar technology. And
yeah, I was on one with you and Harry, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are doing that, and just incredible.
And ultimately save money, I think, in the long term, and still impact people. We just did one for Microsoft, I don't know, for 100,000 people.
Yeah.
You know, and then Russell and I. So I, you know, I think right now it's just a matter of like, what's the truth, and accepting that things can change really quickly for the better, and so I can't predict just because Q2 was a certain way. Doesn't mean Q3 is going to be that way. And so I can really focus on my next behavior. Like the thing about Russell, I remember our first, when he came out to Seattle, and we'd been together, you know, obviously in Bradenton and the Senior Bowl and all those things. But I came out right before OTAs, and he was with his first wife at the time, and we met at the Red Robin in Bellevue. And I remember Seattle paid Matt Flynn. And Russ just said, you know, I'm gonna get this guy. And I said, he's like, I don't know when. I don't know if it's gonna be in the beginning of the season or whatever. And I said, there's something he's doing. He's like, it's less about what he's doing and more about what I'm doing.
That's the Red Robin. That's right there at Bellevue Mall, right?
Yeah, the Bellevue Mall, and we were there. And Russell's behavior is so far ahead of his success. Yeah. And the more you can behave yourself into becoming anything, you know, for the most part that you have the capability for. And so Russ is such a great example of that. because for so many years, even the early years making 280 grand, and it's a lot of money, but obviously it's not, 36 million right now, highest paid in the history of football. But he was doing all those things, from sleeping, from massages, from studying, from, all the preparation. And then the opportunities came. And I think that's where patience and what does a good realtor do? What does a good loan officer do? What does a good broker do? And am I behaving in alignment with those things? And if I'm not, just start to do it a little bit better. And if I am, I've got to sustain it. And at Alabama, and we don't focus on outcomes. Alabama, and I just did a podcast with Coach Saban, and there's nothing that says anything about winning or championships.
No,
nothing. So we don't set outcome goals. Everything's based on behavior. In my 8 years there, and then now being at Georgia, it's the same thing. And so it starts with the plan, but your plan is how do I maximize what I have? And one of the great things I think that people can learn from Russ is he doesn't measure himself with who he thinks he isn't. So many people are like, I'm not them, I'm not that, I don't look like this, I don't have that, I don't sell this region, I don't get Snohomish, I don't have this, why am I in Newcastle? And all these things, rather than like, this is who I am. So Russ is going to be the best 5'10" version of himself that he can be. And he understands he's not 6'4" and doesn't spend a lot of time worrying about that.
Another person that was inside of your book that actually helped inspire the title of your book is Vince Carter. And we all know that Vince Carter he's just a freak on the court. He's played against 60% of all players in the NBA to have ever played, longevity of career. And then you had a conversation with him that led to, you had a hell of a weekend, because it was like, I'm going to talk to Vince Carter here, and then I'm going to go over and meet up with Nick Saban, right? And then
the crazy part is it's so weird to look at it that way, because obviously being in Bradenton, I was 24, and so I got this exposure. Like if I see like Ben Affleck, I went to college with, I'll panic and I'll jump and I'll go, oh my God, it's Ben Affleck. But the sports world, truthfully, they're people. Whether you're 31 and fighting for your career, or you're 14, and if you don't think you play well in the soccer tryout, your mom won't feed you. All the problems are relatively the same. So I've never really thought about it. And I'm not a sports fan per se. I watch more HGTV than ESPN. So living in that world, I've been able to live pretty objectively, and then just build the relationships with the guys. Obviously, I love the competitiveness and all the elements, but Vince, Vince has unique gifts, right? He's 43, he just retired.
Yeah.
Played, like you said, 4 decades or 3 decades, in the league. I think caught the, or the 90s, the 2000, 2010, now 2020. Yeah, for 4 decades. But he one of our teams, we had a bunch of players get in trouble, and we had a conversation, and he said, how many of those guys think they want to be pros? And I said, probably 6, 7 out of 10. And he said, and they think that they can do all that stuff and still be a pro. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, what? And he said, decisions are already made for me at 38 years old to play in the NBA. And I said, like choice is an illusion. He said, there are no choices. Once you make a decision to get to a certain level, your choices are finite. They're already made for you. There are things that great loan officers do, great realtors, great parents. I saw a statistic recently, obviously pre-pandemic, but that the average, married couple communicated 27 minutes a week. And I have friends that would say, that much? Where do I find all the time, right? But obviously that's not true. But you think a good relationship, it takes what it takes. It takes more than 27 minutes. And you've got to find time, and you've got to connect, and you've got to turn the TV off, and you've got to engage, and you've got to, do all those elements. And so the decision about how to have a good relationship, you either do the things or you don't. And average people become average through average behavior, not the gifts they have.
And that letter that you penned over to Nick Saban, I want to just quote a couple of things from there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like you said, this book, it's not like necessarily specified towards the sports community. This is just a great book that you should just read over and over. And so after you have the conversation with Vince, You then went over to meet up with Nick and you wrote this letter. And there's a couple of things in the illusion of choice that you came up with. It says, years from now, when they look back at this team, all that will be left is what we did, not what we could have done if only this or this had happened. This game towards people who do it right, or rewards people who do it right. The game has demands. The game has demands. You do, then you succeed, or you do, then and you succeed, or you don't, and then you struggle. There's no middle area. My point is, we don't have a choice. How are we going to do things if we're going to stay true to the goals we all made at the start? Making bad choices is the lifeblood of average. It feeds it. It consumes it. It protects it. Choice is a competitor as much as any tangible opponent you or any team face. In fact, it's the ultimate competitor. It taunts you. It will lie to you. Like stuff like that, I don't think it gets more real, because right now during this pandemic, we all have choices that we can make. You know, during everything that we're seeing about what's going on in Minnesota, and we won't get into it, but obviously there's choices that we can make today. And like you were saying, you know, you become average by making average choices, or you can be great by making great choices. One thing that I know you're going to talk a little bit about is Russell wanted to know everything that Drew Brees did, right? He wanted to know, and he just continued to work through those behaviors. So talk a little bit more about, what do you think it takes to make the right choices these days?
Well, at first, you have to understand what good looks like in whatever you're trying to be good in. And I also respect people that have no interest in making good choices, you know, because the world needs average people. I mean, I don't fuck around with average people in my life. I don't want to, you know, it's just, but the world needs average people. But average people aren't indicted that way. You know, like I went to school like Charles Wright Academy, which was number 2 in the state next to Lakeside. And
for soccer, right?
Everybody that I was in, you know, in my graduating class, where 20 students went to the Ivy League, were more gifted than me intellectually. When I went down to Occidental College, all those kids from, you know, obviously Oxy's where Obama went, were from Phillips Academy and Sidwell Friends and all those schools. I mean, you know, they were really, really bright, but just because they had those gifts didn't mean that they would exercise them. And I'm responsible for using what I had. So I learned quickly not to judge my lack of, academic aptitude. I said, all right, this is going to take me 3 hours. It takes me 3 hours. I never got upset that it would take a good friend of mine 15 minutes. That was his journey. I have mine, you know? And so if you want to do well, it takes patience. It takes understanding. All right. So if I want to be in the top 10 and I want to be graduate cum laude, what's it going to take for me to compete with the, you know, if only 10 get it and 20 are going to the Ivy League, you know, like, what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to be able to get in. It's just academically, because it wasn't going to work that way for me.
Right.
You know, so I think taking the judgment out of success is powerful. You know, like, well, why do I have to do that? My dad did this, or the more you can take judgment and bias, because there's so many biases that we deal with, and just say, it takes what it takes. The idea of the book title was, it's an objective truth. There is a way to succeed in the world we're living in right now. We're all learning it. You know, I finished my book, and I had a speaker's agent. I spent over $100,000 on PR, because I live in I didn't have Instagram till 6 months ago. I didn't do, you know, because in the sports world, it's not like, you know, what you guys watch. You guys love watching Gary Vaynerchuk and all these guys, like, look how much money I made. You can do it. Slow-mo, getting out of a plane. Athletes don't think that way. Athletes is a service-based industry. So I never did any of that stuff, you know, but then all of a sudden I learned, I wasn't going to do that. I'm not going to be like Gary Vee and tell people to fuck off and yell at them for not being tough. And, you know, you know, that guy can stand on his wallet and speak to the clouds. So I'm not even playing in their game.
No.
But what I am saying,
a ton of authenticity in your book. I think that's the biggest reason I gravitated to it. It's just real.
Well, yeah, and it's just, sort of, I struggle with all these same issues, but in the 18 years of implementing them and the 8 national championships in all these different things, I mean, you learn and you start to understand like what can help people be more successful now. But I had to understand, my point with the book was I had to understand what's the market, how do you sell a book? I had a goal to make it a national bestseller. I hired Tony Robbins' PR company. I knew I was way behind, and did all these things. And then I booked all these speaking gigs. I got an agent. Every speaking gig was canceled because of the current world. So then I had to adapt. Like, okay, well, how can I be successful now and live in Manhattan Beach and other challenges I might be facing? Rather than spend so much time looking backwards. Because simple fact is, my book came out February 3rd. Russ, Sierra, a ton of people. We did PR, went on, and then a month later, the whole world changed. But we were still able to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and we're still able to move the needle. And I believe, I believe the book has done great, relatively speaking. But the timing is what it is. Yeah,
and one thing, I mean, kind of speaking to that, and just everything that you unpacked right there. I know that. With COVID-19, everything was changing. Everyone from your industry, who one of the speakers I was on earlier, he commented, he was speaking, and again, all of his gigs got canceled, just bar none. Well, on the real estate side, we see that too. So real estate agents were told, they can't do what they usually do. Builders, title, escrow, lenders, appraisers couldn't go in houses.
Healthcare, pharmaceuticals. I mean,
it was wild. And so,
for sure.
And so to kind of frame it, you actually, inside of the book, you go into the part where the play happens, with Russell throwing the interception in the Super Bowl. I was there personally. I sat on the 40-yard line. I saw the play happen, broke my heart, was stunned for like 15 minutes. But what you talked about afterwards was how Russell conducted himself in the post-game interview and how his mindset immediately clicked. And it went into, we're going to have the best damn off season of our lives. And you replied with what you typically replied.
Well, not in that moment, Sean.
No, not in that moment, but shortly after.
The first step,
right,
stayed very neutral. And, and I compared and contrasted him to Cam Newton, who I love. But Cam, like many people, he was really frustrated the year after Russell walked out of the press conference and said, "Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser." Right. And I understand that mindset, but Russell knew it was a much bigger thing. So in the moment, hey, look, Pete Carroll says it's his fault. What do you think? Russ says the ball was in my hands. That's my fault. But I look back at, bringing the ball down and getting down there. We just didn't get it in. And then he did his normal process. Yeah. He did his normal process. He went in, watched the film, graded it, and then, had a period of time, which I hit on in the book, where he wasn't sleeping, and it was like he grieved. Okay? Divorces, you can grieve. Like when in my book where I talk about that is I've seen people that did everything wrong in a divorce. Like, look, when it happens, you can't make it better, but you can do a lot of things to make it worse. Right. When this thing happened, there's a lot of things you can do, which is living in a world that doesn't exist anymore. And all the people right now you see trying to go backwards, you can't go backwards, And I get it if you're 18, 19 years old, and a lot of different types of things. And certainly there's a lot of catastrophizing in and around this thing, but it's something you got to be really smart with, and you got to respect as formidable, and so, like, from Russell's perspective, he couldn't make that moment go away, particularly in front of 124 million people, but there were things he could have done next to make it worse. He did the things to make it better gradually, ending by taking the whole team to Hawaii. And I think that was a process. And one of the things that we did was, how do we have a really good off season? And I have no answers necessarily about how we navigate through now. But I think the better you can get at these webinars, I think the better that you can you do as good as you can based on the circumstances you're dealing with. My
But what
favorite
I love
year in
about-
all of college football, Florida State, we went 9-4. 9-4 was as good as we could be, and we got there. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're thinking about, I got to be killing it right now, surviving might be the win in the short term.
Right. And one of the part that I was alluding to was afterwards, there was a moment where, you know, you decided, Russ, we're not going to work out in the off season in Manhattan Beach, where I think you're at currently, right? So
Well,
you
first
said,
it was Seattle, then it was Manhattan Beach.
yeah, and then
Seattle
you're
was
like,
really struggling to get over it.
let's
And then
look
it was
to
Manhattan Beach where
county-
we were the year before.
yeah, let's look 2 counties south. Let's go down to San Diego, right? And so you're going through that process, and you get Russell's dogs down there. You get the pool ready. You get the massage room ready. You get everything lined out, and you had a philosophy that you shared in the book that I want everybody to hear right now if they've never read the book. Well, when somebody asked you, well, that's not your job, is it? Right? What'd you say?
Yeah. I mean, for my mindset, is it takes what it takes. I didn't even think twice about what was my job or what wasn't my job. Like at the end of the day, I wanted to position Russell as someone that works to support him and has a friendship with him to be in the best position to come down and start at 8.0 on the treadmill. So,
yeah, you know, like getting things done is the job, right?
We got all that. And so my brother was a realtor. He contacted a realtor down in San Diego. He got the process going. We worked. We went down, went through the process. My wife came down. We made sure the place was good. Russell's people flew down. They flew down the dogs. We had everything all set up. We put the invisible fence in. We went into a very specific community that was, you know, designed. And I stayed out down there for a week getting everything ready, and then picked him up in a private plane, and we went right in. And first thing he did was do a pull workout and his massage. And then we went and investigated trainers for the next couple of days, picked a trainer. And yeah, that's not my job as a sports psychology person. But that's the role that I needed to be at that time. So I did it without judgment. And a lot of people have always worried, you know, like I've found value in such non-traditional ways because I never wanted to be like a sports psychology or mental conditioning person. Come see me in my office. I mean, half the meetings I've had are Walmart, you know, picking dudes up at all sorts of different places, you know, and then, you know, not being overwhelmingly bright, you know, which I'm not afraid to admit. I've learned so much more from the athletes, and Michael Johnson, the Olympic sprinter, became a huge validation for me and became one of my best friends. So everything that I would do was based on something that helped somebody else get to number one in the world. And that's the standard that I've surrounded myself with, which has raised me up. And then also in this particular area, because of my dad, I obviously, you know, have a high level of aptitude.
And I think that's important for everybody to hear right now, because the situation that we're in where, you know, with the pandemic and everything, look, there's going to be a lot of things that fall outside of your job, outside of your designated job title. But at the end of the day, the team, the fans, the people we represent, which in real estate could be our clients, our managing broker, you know, our referral partners, our business partners, they're all depending on us just to get the job done. And they don't care what's inside of our job title. It takes what it takes, right?
Yeah. And I think there's no, you know, there's no doubt. I mean, I think there are fields that have a more finite responsibility, like a oncologist or an orthopedic or a dentist, or, you know, but I think still the best people in those fields, you know, their humanity, their willingness to follow up, their emails, their calls, and empathy. And so again, it comes down to judgment, right? If I start judging, why am I doing this? That's the wrong way to look at it, as opposed to just, it takes what it takes. And that's, I think, the great thing about the sports world. Even though I've been in all these big moments, you know, and I've learned to embrace them. You know, I've learned to appreciate them. I know, like when we were playing Oklahoma a couple of years ago. I'm at this moment. I'm on my knee, and our head coach Kirby Smart's to the left, and our defensive coordinator Mel Tucker's to the right. And I went to school 2 miles from here, Division III school, 2 miles from the Rose Bowl. Yeah. Played basketball and soccer. Average fan, like 13 people. And I look up, and Baker Mayfield's got the ball, and it's a 3rd and 2, and I'm like, what? How am I here?
Right.
At this moment, but I've worked really hard to build relevance to be able to, in a world where like I said, there are no Tony Robbins, to find a way to be valuable at some level, and earn that right to be in those moments, and to learn how to be helpful. And so I remember just kind of looking up at the sky, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And but a lot of that has come from being okay with doing whatever I got to do to build relationships. I mean, half of what I do now, that it was just like, okay, sports psychology is not a growing industry. And I knew this by 25, 26 years old. How can I find a way to be more of a strategist and a get shit done guy for whoever I'm working for, a female sport, male sport, and then ultimately into the other sports, and then now in the business world. I mean, the whole goal, ultimately, Russell's brother Harrison was with us one of the nights before the Super Bowl and said, how come Russell gets a different type of training than I do? And he was an executive in the pharmaceutical space. Yeah. And he's doing, good stuff, Dale Carnegie and sales training, all this stuff. But why is Russell talking about neutral thinking, less than all these different things that I've never heard of? And so our idea, we got up together in Seattle with Larry Estrada from Goldman Sachs and brought a group of 13, 14 people. I said, well, Russ, if we build a business, people have to be interested. I mean, a lot of people want to be bullshitted too. They want to go on top of Tiger Mountain in Issaquah and meditate. And I said, which has value, but we, we don't know where people were. And so we built out Limitless Minds, a B2C business with a strong digital platform and all these other elements to teach some of these things that we've found value with behind the scenes in the sports world.
Yeah, and Limitless Minds is available. We'll put the link inside here.
Yeah, and the book is just another piece of just taking some of the concepts. And it's a 3-hour listen on Audible. Russell reads the foreword. It's just simple. It's a really, really simple concepts. But I think they're tried and true in some really, really big moments, both in business and sports.
Yeah, and a good friend of mine, Dave Savage, who you were on with a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, good dude.
Yeah, good dude. You said a great quote on there that I'll definitely communicate to everybody that's watching this, and that is, dude, don't go read a bunch of different books. Just read this one. Read this one over and over and get the concepts ingrained.
Yeah, I mean, I always get, now, particularly now, kind of understanding social media a little bit more, these DMs, what should I read next? Don't be a serial reader.
Yeah.
Pick your philosophy and amplify around it, add some elements, and then just live it. Some people are reading so many different things. Like right now, what's going to allow me to succeed as best I can as a parent, helping, because a lot of parents right now are homeschool teachers on top of, all the other elements. And then also, just feeling safe to go back to work. And there's so many different mitigating factors. And one of the things that I work as also with the Clippers, and they have a great portal that gives you the relevant information. What do I need to know in Southern California? What's happening with this? And it's just all just truth-based, objective. So for this whole period of time, for 3 months and a week, I've only watched, and I've counted 78 minutes of news, in 3.5 months.
Wow.
Because I don't judge people, Sean, but for me, there are huge consequences if I go down that road, because I get really scared, particularly anything connected to health. I get scared, and when I get scared, I'm not effective.
Right.
That's my truth. Other people might be able to watch 175 hours of it a day and not have consequences, but that'd be bullshit.
I hear you. All right, I got a couple of just real quick questions for you.
I got a hard stop. One of them, perfect.
One of them is you wrote Russell had keys, certain key things hung up in his locker that you worked with him on all year. One of the years he made to the Super Bowl. Great fundamentals, great balance, be engaged. Do you think that this applies inside of this arena of real estate agents and home builders right now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I remember reading a book a few years ago by a realtor about a success list. But this idea of neutral behaviors. So great balance for Russell is obviously physiologically the elements for a quarterback, but it's also every Tuesday, in a normal time frame, either in San Diego or, Seattle, going to Seattle Children's Orthopedic, how he lives the balance of his life, church, the relationship he has with Judah Smith, all the different things from that. Great fundamentals. There are fundamentals that make a good loan officer, make a good realtor. Outbound calls, putting your pamphlets together, dropping things off at people's homes, web blast, all the different types of things that you need to do. Are you executing those fundamentals? And then fundamentals in your life, talking to your family and taking care of your health and exercising and all the other things. And then being engaged. Being engaged for Russell says, no matter what happens, I'm sitting in the front row and setting the tone. And
right.
Then KTN, keep taking notes. It takes what it takes, and you don't need to be sick to get better. Great can get greater. And I think that's the focus.
So when you mentioned in your book, you say two things in working with the NBA, NFL, and MLB that you've learned is that you feel would be applicable, or these words I think would be applicable towards real estate agents and home builders too. You said, it's what you do, not how you feel, that gets things done. We can do our own way, or we can do our own things into feeling the way we need to. It's hard to feel your way into achieving a damn thing. And then you also had, we all want things of value, and one is the precursor, or I'm sorry, one of those is the precursor to motivation. But
wanting is a good thing.
Wanting's a good thing. So talk about that.
Thing. There's no doubt. And it's a precursor. Because if you don't want it, it's going to be hard to ever get it. It's just
right.
it's just that idea of doing versus feeling. Like even this, one of the things that's good to do right now is exercise. So sometimes in the middle of the day, I'll leave and go up to Pasadena, and nothing in me will want to do that. But Sean and I will drive up there, and a third of the way through, we're both grateful that we're on this hill and we're climbing and just getting out of that routine. And then even when stretches where you're driving through riots and, all the crazy stuff that's happened, but right. By doing it, the feelings caught up. Your feelings will eventually catch up with what you do. If you let your feelings lead you, then you may not do much, and so your behavior precedes your success in my experience. But I also think there's a lot, like if I'm listening to this right now, and I've got a formula and I'm doing, you don't have to do anything different. Right. Some of these things that make sense, they make sense. What I know is there's, negativity is a real problem. And if you're competing against it right now in the controllable ways, take more control of it.
Yeah.
And Sean, I give you 30 seconds, but I got to wrap up.
Yeah, just
Sean,
one last thing then.
On the webinar.
Yep, one last thing. Your dad played such a huge role in your life. What's one thing that you think he would say right now in these times?
I think in context of knowing everything that I'm going through right now, I think he'd be proud. My dad was never, you should do this,
Yeah.
Teach your fireman. It was more the skill set, of having the idea of self-esteem, which people make fun of. There's nothing funny about it. It means the degree to which you can handle life. And this is a time where a lot of us are being tested. And I think, but far from thriving, but I think I'm with the hand that I've been dealt in the short term, I think my dad would be proud of the effort I'm making to be well-rounded and manage his time. I think he'd be proud of the relationship I have with my former spouse. I think he'd be proud of, a lot of those things. And I think there's some other things, Sean, he'd be saying, hey man, you need to find another level with these things too. My dad was not a touchy-feely, lovey guy. He was great in terms of externally to other people, but he was his life was his example, and I'm grateful for the years I got to watch him as a coach at Central Kitsap or Clover Park, and then obviously with the Pacific Institute, Edge Learning Institute. So,
well, man, I'm blessed to know you. I'm blessed to know you. I'm thankful for your time, man. And you guys share the stream. I'll get you 10 copies of the book if you guys first 10 people to share it. So thanks, Trev. I appreciate you, man.
You bet, Sean. Best luck to you. Let's stay in touch, brother. Okay.
Let's definitely do that. Thank you, my man.
All right. Take care.
All right, guys. That's it. Trevor Moawad, author, Russell Wilson's personal coach, gave you some of the best insight on what you can do. So again, if you guys have any questions about any of the speakers, their materials, please let me know. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.